After my sister and her husband moved in with our parents, they were absolutely furious when I refused to babysit their kids so they could simply relax, and with our parents siding with them over me, I decided to move out and completely stop paying their bills, ending the toxic arrangement once and for all. Fresh out of college with my business degree, I ended up back in my childhood home. I'm Anna, 22 years old, and honestly, I hadn't planned on returning to my parents' place, but here I was. The job hunt didn't last long. Within a week, I snagged a position at Davidson Marketing with a pretty solid salary and promising performance bonuses. That evening, while enjoying Mom's meatloaf, I shared my good news. I had planned to stay for about 3 months, save up some cash, and then get my own apartment. But the clinking of forks and plates stopped abruptly as Mom and Dad exchanged one of those looks that always spelled trouble. "Anna, you know I can only work part-time at the library because of my back problems," Mom said. Dad cleared his throat, adding, "And things aren't looking great at the plant. There are rumors of layoffs. We really need your help with the bills." Mom softly continued, "Plus, you wouldn't have to pay rent here. It just makes more sense, doesn't it?" I stared at my half-eaten meatloaf, feeling trapped. They had a point, after all, they were my parents. I guess I could stay longer. Life settled into a routine. I went to work, came home, paid the bills, and Mom always had dinner ready. It seemed manageable until last weekend when my sister Sarah arrived with her husband Mike and their kids, Emma and Lucas. My parents transformed as if someone had flipped a switch. "Oh, my precious angels," Mom exclaimed, scooping up 4-year-old Emma, while Dad hoisted Lucas onto his shoulders. "Sarah, darling, you look wonderful. Tell us everything, what's been going on?" I stood in the doorway, watching as my parents fussed over their eldest daughter and her picture-perfect family, hanging on every detail, from how her garden was doing to what new words Lucas had learned, and even how her book club was going. They never showed that kind of interest in my life, not even when I made the dean's list or won the business school's leadership award. "Anna, be a dear and make some coffee," Mom called over her shoulder, barely glancing my way as she bounced Lucas on her knee in the kitchen. That day, listening to my family's laughter from the living room, I couldn't help but remember how things had always been. Sarah, 7 years older, had always been the star while I played the supporting role. I recall sitting at the same kitchen table at 11, proudly showing Mom my straight-A report card. She barely glanced at it before returning to her conversation with Sarah about college applications. "That's nice, Anna," she said, casually waving me away. "Sarah, honey, which universities are you considering?" Back then, every dinner centered on Sarah's achievements, her grades, extracurriculars, and college prep. I sat quietly eating my peas as Mom and Dad listened intently to every detail of her AP classes and campus tours. Everything changed even more when Sarah got accepted to Brighton University. I was 11 at the time, and I still remember that dinner like it was yesterday. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," Mom exclaimed with tears in her eyes. "We'll make it work, won't we, Robert?" Dad nodded solemnly. "We'll take out a student loan. Our Sarah deserves the best education." A week after Sarah left for college, they sat me down for a different kind of talk. "Anna," Dad said seriously, "we need to tighten our belts for a while. The loan payments and Sarah's college expenses are heavy." That's when things really shifted. While my classmates upgraded to new phones each year, I clung to my old flip phone until it finally broke. When I needed new clothes, we shopped at thrift stores instead of the mall. Christmas gifts became practical, socks and school supplies, but they always sent money to Sarah. "Your sister needs to focus on her studies," Mom would say as she wrote another check. I learned my lesson early. At 15, I joined every club and academic competition I could find, stayed up late studying not just for good grades, but for perfect ones, and wrote scholarship essays until my hands cramped, because I knew I couldn't rely on a student loan. It paid off when I earned a full scholarship to State University, and I still remember the look of relief on my parents' faces when I told them they wouldn't have to spend a dime on my education. Meanwhile, Sarah graduated, landed a job in Brighton, and quickly married Mike, her college sweetheart. Within 2 years, she had Emma, and Lucas came along shortly after. My parents were over the moon. Sarah had created the perfect family. Now, every monthly visit followed the same routine. Sarah and Mike would show up with the kids, and before I could even say a proper hello, Sarah would be planning the weekend. "Anna, you'll watch Emma and Lucas while we go shopping, right?" she'd say, not really considering that Mike and I hardly got any alone time these days. The first few times I suggested that our parents could watch the kids instead, Mom would say, rubbing her back, "Oh honey, you know it's hard for me to keep up with little ones, and your father needs his rest on weekends." So there I was, spending yet another Saturday watching Frozen for the 100th time with Emma while Lucas scribbled on my bedroom walls. Sarah and Mike were off having lunch with friends, and our parents were tending the garden, occasionally peeking in to ask if I needed anything, as if they were doing me a favor. I tried to console myself with the thought that it was just one weekend a month, just one weekend of being the free, reliable babysitter while everyone else lived their lives. Then, a year into that monthly cycle of babysitting and bills, the phone call came that completely turned my already complicated life upside down. I was washing dishes after dinner when I heard Mom's phone ring in the kitchen. I could hear her surprised. "Sarah, oh sweetheart, don't cry. Tell me what happened." Through sobs, Sarah explained that Mike's company had suddenly gone bankrupt. They couldn't afford the rent and had no savings. "Could we maybe stay with you for a while?" Her voice trembled. "Of course you can," Mom replied without hesitation. "We'll make room." My stomach dropped. I stepped forward and cleared my throat. If they were moving in, maybe it was time for me to get my own place. "You'd think I'd suggested burning down the house." Mom gave me a look as if I'd lost it. "Anna, don't be absurd. There's plenty of room for everyone. We're family," Dad said firmly. "We stick together in tough times." They arrived the next weekend with 3 cars loaded with their belongings. I spent Saturday morning shifting my stuff into what used to be our storage room, the tiniest bedroom in the house, barely big enough for a twin bed and a dresser. My old room, which was twice as big, turned into the kids' nursery because they needed room to play. Emma, now 5, and 3-year-old Lucas transformed the entire house into their personal playground. They raced down the hallways, screaming and laughing while Sarah cranked up the TV volume or held long, loud phone calls about how hard this change was for her. "Emma, Lucas, keep it down." I'd call out when they burst into my room for the 10th time, scattering my work papers everywhere. "They're just playing," Sarah would reply dismissively without even looking up from her phone. "Don't be such a grouch." After work, all I wanted was to relax in my room. Maybe read a book or watch something on my laptop. Instead, I had to endure Baby Shark on repeat through thin walls, punctuated by the constant patter of little feet and Sarah's raucous laughter at whatever show was on downstairs. Mike spent his days supposedly job hunting, but I mostly saw him at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone with a worried look. "The job market's tough right now," he'd say whenever anyone asked, "but something will come along soon." Each night I lay in my tiny bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the chaos that had become my home, wondering how I'd let myself get trapped in this situation. Every time I thought of bringing up moving out again, I remembered my parents' reaction and stayed silent. The first utility bill after Sarah's family moved in hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood in the kitchen, staring at numbers that were almost double what I was used to paying. The water bill had skyrocketed, not to mention electricity and heating. Looking at my bank account, I realized that my dreams of saving for my own place were evaporating fast. That evening at dinner, I decided to speak up. About the utility bills, I began, pushing my food around on my plate. "They've doubled since last month. I can't keep covering all these expenses by myself. It's taking almost my entire salary." Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. "Are you seriously complaining about money right now, when Mike and I have lost everything?" "I'm not complaining. I just think we need to figure out a fair way to." "I can't believe how selfish you're being, Anna. We're going through the hardest time of our lives, and all you care about is money." "Sarah, you're right. Family helps family. That's what we do." Mom jumped in. Dad nodded gravely. "Your sister and Mike need our support right now. This isn't the time to be counting pennies." I lowered my gaze, swallowing the words I really wanted to say. "Fine, never mind." A week later, Mike finally landed a job at an insurance company. It paid less than his old position, but at least it was something. I thought maybe things would start to improve. I was wrong. Being alone with the kids all day was exhausting. Sarah, I never get a break. She started complaining as soon as Mike left at 8 and didn't return until 6. Then came the small requests. "Anna, could you watch the kids for an hour while I run to the store?" Or, "Anna, would you mind keeping an eye on them while I take a quick shower?" Before I knew it, those small favors had snowballed. I'd come home from work to find Sarah already dressed up to go out. "Oh, good, you're home," she'd say, grabbing her purse. "Mike and I are meeting friends for dinner. Emma and Lucas had their snack, but they'll need dinner in an hour. We'll be back by 10. Weekends turned into my personal nightmare. Sarah and Mike would casually announce their plans on Friday evenings, a shopping trip, lunch with friends, a movie date, leaving me with the kids for hours. Mom and Dad started visiting relatives more often, usually disappearing right after Sarah and Mike left. So there I was, weekend after weekend, trying to stop Emma from drawing on the walls while Lucas threw another tantrum because I cut his sandwich the wrong way. I'd spend my Saturdays cleaning up toys, making mac and cheese, and watching endless repeats of children's movies, and by Sunday night I was exhausted. My house would be a mess, and I'd still have to cook dinner for everyone. One evening, after an especially exhausting weekend of childcare, I finally mustered the courage to speak up at dinner. "I need to talk to you all," I said, setting down my fork. "I'm really tired. This whole childcare situation isn't working for me." Sarah's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "What do you mean it isn't working? Are you saying you don't want to spend time with your own nephews?" Mom reached over and patted Sarah's hand. "Don't worry, honey. This is actually good practice for Anna. She needs to learn how to handle children when she becomes a mother herself someday. Think of it as training." And just like that, they went back to their usual dinner chatter, Sarah discussing her day, Mom and Dad hanging on her every word, and Mike nodding along. I sat there, almost invisible, pushing food around on my plate. Nothing changed after that conversation. If anything, it got worse. Sarah and Mike seemed to take my complaint as a challenge, finding even more reasons to go out. They'd be waiting by the door when I got home from work, keys in hand. "We're meeting friends at that new downtown restaurant," they'd say, already halfway out the door. "Kids have had their snack, thanks, Anna." Weekends became something I dreaded. I'd wake up on Saturday morning with a pit in my stomach, knowing I'd spend the next 2 days watching Paw Patrol and mediating sibling fights while Sarah and Mike lived it up. Then one Wednesday changed everything. I was at my desk at work, trying to focus on a marketing report despite my exhaustion, when my friend Rachel stopped by my cubicle. "Hey, want to do something fun this weekend?" she asked, perching on the edge of my desk. "A bunch of us are heading to Pine Ridge Ski Resort for a quick getaway, leaving Saturday morning and coming back Sunday night. The slopes are supposed to be perfect right now." For the first time in months, I felt a spark of excitement. Friday evening, I was in my tiny bedroom, packing my duffel bag and actually feeling happy about an upcoming weekend, for once. I just folded my warmest sweater when Sarah appeared in my doorway. "What are you doing?" she asked, eyeing my half-packed bag. "Packing for a ski trip," I replied, rolling up my thermal socks. "I'm heading to Pine Ridge with some friends from work." Sarah's face darkened. "You need to cancel." I looked up, startled by her tone. "What? Why would I do that?" "Because," she said, crossing her arms, "Mike and I are going to Aunt Linda's 60th birthday party in Milburn this weekend. Mom and Dad are coming too. You need to stay here with Emma and Lucas." I couldn't help but laugh, actually laugh out loud at the sheer audacity of it all. "You're joking, right?" I said, continuing to fold my ski pants. "You can't seriously expect me to cancel my plans just because you didn't think to tell me about yours." Sarah's face flushed red. "This isn't funny, Anna. You're being completely unreasonable. What's absurd is thinking I'll just drop everything at a moment's notice to be your on-call babysitter." Again, Sarah's eyes went wide. She stood frozen for a second before sputtering, then spun on her heel and stormed out of my room. "Mom, Dad, Mike." I heard her yell down the hall, "You won't believe what Anna's doing." I kept packing, my hands trembling with anger. The sound of heavy footsteps signaled the arrival of reinforcements. My already cramped room felt even tighter as Sarah, Mike, and my parents crowded in. Mom's face wore that familiar, disappointed look. "What's this about?" "You're going skiing," she demanded, arms crossed. "Exactly," I replied, zipping up my duffel bag. "I'm headed to Pine Ridge Resort with some friends this weekend." "But you can't," Sarah snapped. "We have Aunt Linda's party." "No, you have Aunt Linda's party," I corrected. I stopped packing and faced them all. Why am I just hearing about this party now? Why wasn't I included in any planning? Mom hesitated, visibly uncomfortable for once. Sarah cut in, her tone dripping with condescension. "We all talked it over and decided this works best. We go to the party and you watch the kids." "You said it yourself, without me," I repeated slowly, and then planned my entire weekend around that. "How convenient," Sarah sneered. "You can't just bring small kids to a proper party. Aunt Linda specifically said no kids." I shrugged, hefting my bag. "Sounds like your problem. They're your kids, Sarah. Figure it out." "What's that supposed to mean?" Mike finally asked, frowning. "It means exactly what it sounds like. I have plans, I'm going skiing. Your kids are your responsibility, not mine. If you can't manage them at the party, then either don't go or hire a babysitter." "A babysitter? And with what money?" Sarah screeched. "Not my problem." I turned to face them all, suddenly feeling more empowered than I had in months, maybe even years. "Let me be clear, I'm skiing tomorrow. I'm done being your free babysitter, done with my weekends hijacked, my plans ignored, and my life treated like it's nothing. If you need childcare, that's on you. Stop assuming I'll always cover for you." The silence that followed was deafening. They all stared as if I were speaking in tongues. Sarah's mouth flapped open and shut like a fish out of water. Mom looked as if she'd been slapped. Dad seemed to try disappearing into the doorway, and Mike just wore that same bewildered look he'd had ever since his company went under. Before the shock faded, Sarah's face crumpled and she burst into dramatic sobs, covering her face with her hands. Mike muttered something under his breath that sounded distinctly like, "ungrateful," while Dad shook his head, "absolutely selfish." I stood there, duffel bag still slung over my shoulder, as my family morphed into a chorus of accusations. Selfish, ungrateful, inconsiderate, immature, each word meant to sting and remind me of my place. Then Mom delivered what she assumed was the final blow. "If you walk out that door tomorrow, don't bother coming back to this house." To everyone's surprise, I burst out laughing, genuinely laughing, not nervously. They all stared, as if I'd lost my mind. "You know what's funny?" I said, wiping tears from my eyes. "I've been dreaming of moving out for months. I just lacked the courage. And now you've given me the perfect excuse. So thanks, Mom. Now get out." Sarah shrieked fake sobs, forgotten in her anger. "Just get out." I pulled out my phone and dialed Rachel's number, putting it on speaker to make a point. "Hey R, sorry to call so late, but is that offer to crash at your place still on? Not just for after skiing, but maybe a few days." Rachel's upbeat voice filled the room. "I've got a spare room. Wanna come over?" "That would be perfect. I'll be there in 20. I spent the next 15 minutes gathering everything I could cram into my car: clothes, important documents, personal items. They peered from doorways as I made repeated trips up and down the stairs, clearly in disbelief that I was really doing this. Once I loaded the last box, I walked into the living room where everyone had assembled. "Oh, one more thing," I said steadily. "Since I'm not living here anymore, I'm not paying any bills either. You all need to figure out how to support yourselves." Mom's face went pale. "But the utilities, the groceries," I interjected, echoing my earlier words. "Not my problem anymore." I turned and walked out the front door, ignoring Mom's suddenly panicked calls behind me. The drive to Rachel's place was a blur of adrenaline and relief. My phone lit up with calls and messages, angry texts from Sarah, guilt-ridden messages from Mom, stern disappointments from Dad. I ignored them all. The next morning, Rachel and I drove to Pine Ridge Resort as planned. For the first time in what felt like forever, I spent a weekend doing exactly what I wanted. We skied, we laughed, we sipped hot chocolate by a roaring fire, and not once did I have to worry about someone else's kids or problems. When we returned on Sunday night, I fired up my laptop and started searching for apartments. With my salary no longer obligated to support my family, I could finally afford a decent place. By Wednesday, I'd found a small, bright one-bedroom in a nice part of town, only a 15-minute drive from my office. My first week in the new apartment felt like learning to breathe again. Every morning, I woke up to peaceful silence. No screaming kids, no blaring TV, no guilt-inducing messages from Mom. I could make my coffee and actually drink it while it was still hot. Evenings were mine, reading, Netflix, whatever I wanted. But the messages kept coming. I didn't answer the calls, yet I couldn't resist reading the texts. "Mom, how could you abandon us? We need you. Sarah, you're so selfish. The kids keep asking where Aunt Anna is. Dad, your mother is devastated. You need to fix this." They cycled between guilt trips, angry accusations, and desperate pleas. I read them all without replying, and my silence only seemed to infuriate them further. They weren't used to not having power over me. After a week of this, I sat on my new couch when Mom's number flashed on my phone again. This time, I answered. "Anna." Finally, Mom's voice came through, sharp as ever. "I can't believe you ruined our weekend. Aunt Linda's party was completely thrown off because of your selfish behavior. Sarah and Mike couldn't come since you refused to watch the kids." "Just stop." My voice came out quiet but firm. "I'm done, Mom. I'm tired of being treated like a servant in my own home, expected to sacrifice my time, money, and life for everyone else's convenience. I'm done being the family ATM and free babysitter while being treated like I don't matter." There was a long pause. Then Mom spoke again, her tone softening to that familiar pleading sound. "Honey, I know things haven't been perfect, but we're family. We need you. The bills this month, we're struggling without your help." "No, Mom. I'm done. Maybe one day we can have a real relationship, but it has to be on equal terms. No more manipulation, no more guilt trips, and no more treating me like a walking wallet or free childcare service. Until then, I need space to live my own life." I hung up and immediately blocked her number. Then I went through my phone and blocked them all: Mom, Dad, Sarah, even Mike, and did the same on social media. It felt terrifying and liberating, like cutting the anchor lines I hadn't even realized were holding me back. Maybe one day, with enough time and distance, I can rebuild something new with my family, something healthier, with clear boundaries and mutual respect. Or maybe not. Either way, I'm done sacrificing my own happiness and well-being to meet their endless demands.